Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in. So we do have a theme for this AMA session, and the theme is obviously on the screen. We want to talk about how to reduce a passage to its bones. Now, already there is a question that has been asked, and I think some of you have sent in some questions earlier on as well. So I will try my best to address those questions. At the same time, since this topic is something that I cannot answer without content, I also have some content that I want to share with you, just to tell you what exactly it is that you need to do. Okay, so first of all, there is a question that says that I struggle with inference-based and if-false weaken type questions. Let's talk about the second variety first. See, whenever a question stem has if-false, you need to ensure that you convert it to an if-true format. So I'm not sure if you are an IMS student or whether you're not, but there is a very simple way to convert it. Whenever it says if false, then X, then it's logically equal to if true, then not X. So basically, I kind of rephrase the rest of the statement so that I don't have to negate each option to check them. So you need to simplify the question stem. Now, if it says, if false, which of the following will weaken the argument, that is equal to saying, if true, which of the following will probably not weaken the argument or maybe strengthen the argument. So that's how I would interpret it. Okay. I hope you're doing well. Thank you. I am doing much better than I was last week. I've given a few SIMCATs, but my scores are not increasing. See, a fairly generic question on the whole. It's a little difficult to answer because I don't really know what is the pattern to those scores. Sometimes it's a question of increasing accuracy. Sometimes it's a question of increasing attempts. So I think the best way to proceed for most of us would be to benchmark ourselves against the toppers of the class, right? And try and see what those guys are doing, which you may not be doing. So look at the way that they distribute their time. Look at the way that, what questions they have attempted. If they have gotten a question right, but you have not gotten it right, then you need to check whether you understood the question, whether you kind of misread some part of the passage, what exactly is the reason for you getting the answer wrong. So you effectively need to see what they did right, which you did not. I think that's one way that you could probably look at things. If your accuracy is less than 60%, then you need to try and reduce attempts and see what happens. If your accuracy is between 60 to 70%, then you need to try and increase attempts and see what happens. So try this out in some of the section tests, and maybe one of these methods will work for you. I'm taking 8 to 12 minutes per passage. Can I bring it down to 7 to 9? Okay. In some of the tests, yes, I think it's possible to do that. In fact, some SIMCATs have been easy enough that you can solve a passage in about 7 to 8 minutes. And that's not only true of the SIMCATs, that is also true of CAT. So I have been able to do the first passage in CAT in about 7 to 8 minutes. In fact, that's pretty essential if you want to do well in the rest of the test, because not all passages can be solved in 7 to 8 minutes. So you have to save time there so that you have remaining time for the rest. Okay. In RCs, I'm getting 1 to 2 questions wrong due to overthinking. In options, also overthinking an option leads to 1 or 2 questions. Okay. The reason that I'm thinking about how to answer this is that if you know for sure that overthinking is the problem, then the solution is pretty evident, right? Then you need to not overthink. I know that we feel that the test is kind of out to get us. And because of that, we think that, okay, maybe I need to double check my answers. My experience has been that in VARC, double checking your answers has not really helped. You need to work it out once, slowly and steadily, but not go back and rethink it. So if that is what you mean by overthinking it, then you need to simply stop doing that. So don't go back and recheck your answers. For VARC, it doesn't help. How to identify the primary purpose of the passage? That actually I do want to talk about today. So I'm going to take up one passage from CAT 2023, and we're going to try and see how you can sift through the content and figure out what is important and what is not important. But for that, I'll have to show you the passage. And there are also two questions that I would like to answer based on whatever work we do with that passage. I'm losing 7 to 8 marks in VRC, but I don't think that's too bad, honestly. If you're telling me that you're attempting maybe about how many questions? You're scoring about 24 to 25 marks. I'm assuming that you are trying to get to a place where you're scoring above 30, right? Okay. One of the easiest ways to do that is to increase your VA accuracy. So basically, you need to solve about 2 more questions correctly, right? So check if your VA accuracy is very poor, or check if you can do one more RC passage. I think these are the two methods you can explore. Now, in different tests, it might actually be a little different as to what will work. In some tests, VA is a little more easy as compared to others. In some tests, you'll realize that VA is not that great, but I could have solved all the RC passages. So either solve 2 more VA questions or try to solve one more passage. Now, if you have decided to solve one more passage, that basically means that you're solving the first passage in about 7 to 8 minutes so that you have time left for the second and third passage. Okay. I'm stuck at the 90 to 95th percentile in VRC. Again, based on experience entirely, what I would suggest, you need to see whether you can solve an additional passage. Now, I normally do all 4. The reason it helps me is that my RC is far better than my VA. VA, if I attempt about 8 questions, if I'm very good and I'm in the zone, I might get about 5 right. So what has always helped me score higher is solving 4 passages. Particularly if you're trying to get into a 99, 99.8 sort of a zone, then you might want to try all 4. I think that's probably the best way. For that, you have to be super efficient. Okay, the trick to solving the 4th RC is to ensure that your first one is done in about 7 to 8 minutes. If you're not able to do that, then the 4th RC is not going to happen. So it's critical. In fact, there should be, these benchmarks that you should set for yourself. First RC, 7 minutes or 8 minutes. Second RC, 18 minutes. It should not be 20. Third RC, you might want to take another 8 minutes to do. The 4th RC is something you have to think about. Sometimes it is so difficult that you really don't want to touch it. But I've been trying to do the 4th RC pretty much for the last 3-4 years, and I've always managed a little bit. Some years I've gotten only 2 questions correct. Some years I've gotten 3 questions correct. But I've always managed to do it, provided I do that first RC really fast. Okay. I usually fall for option traps. See, option traps are actually far more likely in specific detail type questions or those weird reasoning type questions. So in today's passage also, there is one reasoning question where I think the options are slightly complicated. Now, if we know what the option traps are, for example, I know one option trap is that they couch the correct option in different words. So how do I get out of that trap? I need to paraphrase the answer before I look at options. Paraphrasing will help me see that, okay, this option is very similar to what I have in mind. So you need to have the answer before you go to options. That is one method. Another thing that you could always look out for is extreme words. Again, some people are taking this shortcut for granted. Anytime they see an extreme word, they decide to eliminate that option. For that, you need to be sure that the author is not making an extreme argument. So if the author has said that something must always be done, then the author is saying something must always be done. Then we cannot eliminate an option that says always. Barring that, however, extreme options are usually not the answer. Another thing that I've seen is that a lot of times the author takes a slightly middle of the path approach. So that is the reason that extreme options don't work. When it comes to primary purpose or summary questions, I've seen that they're usually not very tricky. If you have understood the passage, then those questions you'll be able to do. So the only thing left are those specific detail and the reasoning type questions. To solve reasoning, I think GMAT material is very, very good. So you might want to work a little bit on that type of content. Basically work on critical reasoning, and it will help you solve all those strengthen and weaken the argument type questions. I generally struggle with VA while breezing past the RCs. I'm not sure what the struggle means entirely. So in VA, if you're thinking I'm going to get 80% accuracy, that's very, very unlikely. The way that it works is that out of one odd sentence, you're likely to get out of three odd sentences, you're likely to get one correct, sometimes two correct if they design that section to be easy. If there are summary questions I historically haven't really found to be very easy, in the sense that out of three, you might get one correct. Para completion, again, out of three, you might get one correct, right? So one of the things that you need to think about is, do you want to solve all 8, or would you be happy solving only about 6 questions? That will also save you time, particularly if some questions are time consuming. So maybe tweak the attempts a little bit. Other than that, for each question type, we have certain techniques that we've outlined. Initially, when we teach you those techniques, a lot of students follow them, right? And after a while, they start saying, okay, I think I've got the hang of it. And then they let go of that technique. So maybe get back to the basics. So for example, for summary questions, we have something called the XYZ. If you're able to do that, then your accuracy is likely to increase. And if that is not helping also, then it's probably a difficult question. Odd sentences, because it's a theta type question, most of the times I would always do it. So that leaves only para completion, right? So para completion, if you understand the paragraph, you know what you're reading, you should attempt it. I found that para completion is usually not very, very challenging. Perhaps one question is difficult. Okay. 3 RCs in 30 minutes with 75% accuracy. What should I do to improve my time in RCs to attempt the fourth one? So basically, your 3 RCs can't happen in 30 minutes, right? Your first 2 RCs have to happen before 20 minutes are up. So your third RC has to happen by the 25th minute mark. Anything after that, and you will not be able to do the fourth one. Okay, now the fourth RC is always going to be a little rushed. You might have only about 6 to 7 minutes to do it a lot of times. There are very few people who can breeze through RCs and do all 4 and also score really well. I'm definitely not one of those people. I always have 6 to 7 minutes only left for the fourth one. But a lot of times, if you look at your test very carefully, you will realize that there are some questions where you have wasted that extra minute, another question where you spent another 1 minute. So if you just shave off that time and ensure that your question solving time is between 1.5 to 2 minutes, you might find the time to do the fourth one. If you have 5 to 6 minutes, I think you should go for the fourth RC. You could try the paragraph to question approach. So if you have 5 to 6 minutes left, I think that's good enough time to give it a shot, because you've done all the VA questions, right? That's the only thing left to do. So read the first 2 paragraphs, see if there are any questions you can answer. Then read the remaining 2 paragraphs, see if there are any questions you can answer. So the paragraph to question approach is what you can probably try out if you have 5 to 6 minutes left. In some SimCats, I'm able to score around 22 to 26, sometimes 13 to 14. What should I do? Okay. Well, as far as I can see, it's not a huge difference, right? I mean, it's a difference of about 3 questions or so sometimes, or maybe 4. So maybe that means that in certain cases, one passage worked out really well for you, or VA worked out really well for you. In other tests, either one passage did not work out, so your accuracy was very poor, so you have lost marks. So in that case, you need to explore why a particular passage has not worked out. Was it the topic? Was it the fact that it was difficult and you decided to give it a shot and then it did not work in your favor? Or Was it a test in which you should actually have done more RCs, but you decided to focus on VA? I know people who say that I can only do 2 passages and after that I will do VA because I don't want to do any more RC. I don't think that's a very good technique. I think you need to be open to doing the third passage or even the fourth passage, particularly when the VA seems a little difficult. So, do you do VA or do you do RC? That option you need to always keep flexible. Um, okay, I have lost track of a few questions. If you're aiming for 30 to 35, then what should be your attempt strategy? I believe that you should definitely be trying to do definitely 3 passages, undoubtedly. And if you want to be on the safe side, then maybe the fourth one. See, the moment you want to get closer to a score of 40, then you definitely need to start thinking 4 passages plus VA. Because what happens is 3 passages, you have a total of 12 questions to choose from. Now, I'm sure that you're not going to get 12 out of 12 correct. I also recommend that you leave out 1 or 2 questions. So your attempt actually should be around 10. Out of 10, even if you're doing really well, you might get 7 to 8 correct, right? So you basically have somewhere around 18, 19, 20 odd marks. You still need to get 15 marks, right? Without losing any more. That becomes very, very difficult if you do not do any more RCs. So theoretically, if you want to get to a score of 35, 36, 37, take a look at doing the fourth RC. Okay. Now, I'm going to take it for granted that all of you have been practicing your RC and VA, all right? If you have not been practicing and you're saying that my score is not increasing or my accuracy is not increasing, then my answer is please ensure that you're solving RC every day. That has to be done, okay? If you are doing that and it is still not working, then step 2 is start creating an error log. An error log basically is question number, why I got the answer incorrect. Question number, why I got the answer incorrect. Okay. Now, the reason that I'm asking you to create an error log is to check whether there's a pattern to your errors. Are you making the same mistake again and again? If you're able to identify the kind of mistakes you're making, then maybe you will stop making them or at least make them less frequently. Okay. My score reached 25 to 26, but if I try to attempt 2 or 3 more, score drops substantially. Yeah, I think that can happen because if you try to attempt 2 or 3 more, that is equal to saying that you are taking about 6 to 7 minutes more. Now that 6 to 7 minutes can take a toll on the earlier questions as well. So those of you who are struggling to increase your score, particularly from the RCs, please check your reading time. Normally, when people are starting their preparation, I say, don't worry about the time, focus on accuracy. But once you get to a score of, say, 20 on the whole, or 18 or 19, then you definitely need to start checking your reading time. The reading time for a passage should not be more than 3 to 4 minutes. The first passage that you pick, in fact, it should be between 2 to 3 minutes if you're trying to be very efficient. So if you are taking more than 3 to 4 minutes to read a passage, that is the time you need to cut down on. How do you cut down on that time? That was actually what I wanted to cover today. In para summary, I'm not able to divide the paragraph into XYZ part. Okay, so if you're not able to do that, another method that you could use is just say that, okay, I think these 2 sentences belong together. So divide that entire text into 3 random parts, wherever you feel that you can divide it. Okay, the reason I'm asking you to do that is that it will let you see how one part is different from the next. So if nothing, prepare shorter summaries by dividing that paragraph into 3. That's all. It doesn't have to be a perfect division. You can just say, okay, 4 lines, first division. Next 4 lines, another division. You could do it like that. Again, that technique may or may not work for you all the time, but over time, it will help you get better at dividing because right now you're probably being very careful and saying, okay, I don't really know how to figure out these 3 parts. I'm saying stop wherever you want to stop and say, this is part 1, this is part 2, this is part 3. and then see if you're able to summarize those shorter parts. What should be percentile in SimCat if we want to aim for a 99 percentile in CAT? Then you should aim for 99 percentile in SimCat. I mean, that's really the way to go. Even if you don't get 99 percentile, if you reach about 95 plus, then I think you have a very good shot at a 99. If you have a habit of panicking, then you need to slow down. Slow down means that for some people, I've said reduce reading time, do more questions, but panicking and anxiety is not going to help you become more accurate. You definitely need to slow down. Say that I am going to take 15 minutes to solve one passage. Then I will take another 15 minutes to solve another passage. Do it very peacefully. Over a period of time, you will actually get faster. All right. The only things that you have to make sure of that you do not get stuck on a question for more than 2 minutes. The moment you reach the 2-minute mark, you need to skip that question. Don't mark an answer. Go to the next one. When I analyze the mocks and solve VRC again, I see that I could easily have solved 3 RCs. But during the mock, I'm not able to solve more. Again, I think that has to do with time management simply. So you have to ensure that you are dividing that section into mini sections. As I said, the first 2 RCs you need to be able to solve in 18 minutes. Okay. If that does not happen, then your third and your fourth RC are not going to happen. So let's say, even if you're aiming for 3 RCs, you still need to ensure that you're completing your 3 RCs in about 26 to 27 minutes, right? So you have 12 to 13 minutes left for VA. So in order to do that, the average time per RC is about 8 to 9 minutes only, which means that the first 2 RCs have to be done in 18. So if that does not happen, you know that you have already mistimed yourself. Try starting with RCs, try starting with VAs, try doing 2 RCs, going to VA, then coming back to solve the 3 RCs. See what sequence works best for you. Okay, now those of you who are trying to follow the 5 pause approach, you need to follow the 5 pause approach without writing. So the 5 pause approach is just a way to read the passage and a way to answer questions, right? It does not necessarily involve writing down everything. So that's what you need to change. You need to do a mental recap. Okay, if you're able to comprehend the RC, but you're unable to answer the questions, that is usually because the questions are either they involve reasoning or they involve specific details. So you have understood the general idea, but somehow you're still getting confused in the options. For specific detail questions, you need to first look at the question stem. Don't look at the answer options. Go back to the passage, locate those keywords in the passage so that you can say, okay, I think the answer is somewhere here. All right. So you first locate the spot where you're likely to find the answer. Then you come back and find the answer options. One of the things that a lot of us end up doing is rereading the whole passage. So this locational accuracy is something you need to develop. Even if you don't remember it the first time, use the keywords in the question stem to find out where in the passage you're supposed to be searching for the answer. So you do need to go back to the passage. Otherwise, your accuracy is not going to be great. For critical reasoning questions, particularly strengthen or weaken, the mistake that people most frequently make is that they don't summarize the argument. So if I have to support the argument or weaken the argument, then I need to be very clear what the argument is. I'm so sorry. So that's one. Secondly, if I want to strengthen the argument or weaken the argument, in both cases, I need to have a shadow answer. A shadow answer will say, okay, so I need to find something that supports the idea that, or I need to find something that goes against the idea that. So let's try to state the function of the answer, what it is supposed to do before you go to the options. All of this is pre-processing before you start looking at the answer options. If you're not doing this, then you're going to struggle with reasoning. If you're not going back to the passage, you will struggle with specific detail. So for all of you who are looking to go to 35 to 40, please try considering the fourth passage. Numerically, I think I tried to demonstrate why the fourth passage kind of becomes important. Because from VA, you are most likely to get what, maybe 12 marks or 15 marks, if at all. Beyond that, it's going to be a little tough, right? So let's say if you don't get 15 marks from VA, then all the remaining marks have to be gotten from RC. Now in RC, if you do 3 passages, you will end up with about 19 to 20 marks. Again, all of this assuming a very, very high accuracy. So the moment your accuracy falls, you are not going to go past the 30 or the 25 range. So the way to increase your marks is to increase attempts, as long as your accuracy remains in the 60 to 70 zone. Wow, lots of questions. Okay. I've been reading passages as well as other articles, yet I'm unable to score well. 14 to 17 is the average range. Okay. So for you, I think what might be better is to ensure that you focus on accuracy rather than speed. 14 to 17 means that you are probably doing about 2 passages or maybe 1 passage and some VA questions. So for you, I think a good strategy would be to solve 2 passages and maybe about 4 to 5 VA questions. That's not a very high number of attempts. That's still about maybe 12 to 13 attempts. So that's the number you need to focus on. Ensure that you are giving adequate time to reading the passage and doing the mental recap of that passage. Why am I focusing on mental? So that you don't start making endless notes. Mental recap basically means after reading the passage, sit back like I'm sitting back right now and ask yourself, what did I just read? If you're able to tell yourself what you just read, then you're ready to answer the questions. If you're not able to do that, revisit the first and the last sentences of each paragraph. Okay. So that will help you remember what you read. And after that, you go to the passage. So 2 passages plus VA, check the number of attempts, check how much time you're spending on each question. If you're getting stuck on questions and you're spending 3 to 4 minutes on questions, that has to stop. I'm actually recommending you guys don't write down points. You need to read a paragraph and you need to try and remember it. There is something called memory, right? We are not asking you to remember all the details. Mostly, you have to remember about 30 to 40% of the passage. That much retention is going to be important. And I haven't gotten to it, but I was trying to say how or which 30 to 40% you need to remember. What is the XYZ points? Okay, so first of all, a lot of times I don't actually write down the XYZ points. I mean, yes, if I have to demonstrate it to you, then I will. But for me, it is more that, okay, initially the author talks about this, then the author talks about this, then the author talks about this. So it's not a detailed XYZ. Initially, topic is A, then it is B, then it is C. So even if you can write down 2 to 3 words, that is helpful. If you're not able to do that, just divide the text into 3 parts. And then see if you're able to say, okay, what is part 1 about? What is part 2? What is part 3? So XYZ is nothing but figuring out the main points from a paragraph so that when you're looking for summary options, you're able to match those summary options to the main points. Okay. Another thing that happens in summary questions is that if it is an argumentative passage, then usually one point is more important than the rest. When is it an argumentative question? When the author clearly says that something is good or something is bad or something should be done or needs to be done. That if I do not include, then I'm missing the point. So a lot of times what happens in summary questions is that there is a very comprehensive option, but it misses out on the main point itself. So there, my job is not to ensure everything is there. My job is to ensure first that the main point is there. And after that, I'm going to try and see whether the supporting points are also there. Priority goes to the main point. The main point in an argumentative passage is going to be recommendation, suggestion, approval, disapproval, stuff like that. How do I identify the mistakes I'm making? Okay, see, the mistakes fall into only a few categories. First, attempted the question even though I did not know the answer. How do you know the answer? When you are able to eliminate option. That is mistake number one. So first check in how many questions you actually guessed. You did not eliminate the second option. You just decided one was better and said, okay, I'll go with this. Mistake number two that we make. We are not able to match the text in the passage to the options. Basically, we didn't see the answer. It was somewhere in the passage, but we just did not see it. All right. Third, misunderstood the question. The question was asking me which one is not going to support the argument. I pick the one that does support the argument. So these are just some common mistakes that all of us make, right? Sometimes we just don't understand an option, did not understand this option, which happened to be the right option. Okay. So this is how you identify the mistakes. Go into the reasons or go into the process by which you got to the right answer. How is it that you did it? What is it that you should have done that you missed doing? And that is why the video solutions are helpful. Okay. See, the moment you start touching scores of above 40, then that pretty much means that you need to go for a high attempt sort of a strategy. So then we're looking at an attempt rate of maybe about 20 to 22 questions. So you can't really miss a passage in that scenario. Okay, so I'm saying that you need to now start looking at doing all 4 passages as far as possible, unless it's a very, very difficult test. Everyone who is trying to approach 40, so you're in the 30s or you're in the 35 or 38 zone, you need to try and see if you can do the 4th passage, particularly if you're talking about some of the recent SIMCATs. While reading a new paragraph, I tend to forget the main content. Okay, I think the best way to handle that is actually to jot down a few points. I know that this is in contradiction of what I had said earlier, but if retention is an issue, try and write down 3 to 4 words. Now, in one of my classes, I was saying exactly the same thing. And I had a student who said, "Man, can you demonstrate how you can reduce this paragraph to 3 or 4 words?" And I agree, it was not easy. But for a lot of paragraphs, I did manage to do it. So you don't have to actually write it down like an essay. You just need to write enough for you to remember. So if you make it a habit and say, you know what, I'm not even going to finish my sentences, then you will be able to reduce the entire passage to maybe about 20 to 30 words. Just a few points. That's it. Wow, there are a lot of questions, huh? I get only 2 to 3 questions correct. See, if you're saying I get 2 to 3 questions correct out of 4, then that's not necessarily bad. But in general, if you're saying I'm getting 2 to 3 questions correct, that usually means that I'm attempting, say, 10 and I'm getting only 2 or 3 right, which is a pretty low accuracy rate, right? So if your accuracy is less than 50, it generally means you need to read more and you need to solve more passages. So should you start from scratch? Yes, you should. That means go slow. Read a paragraph, write down 1 point or 1 small point for that paragraph, read the next paragraph, okay, and so on. Now, I'm going to take a short pause from the questions, and I do want to cover what I wanted to cover, all right? And after that, maybe we'll come back and you can repost your questions, okay? So, please hold on to them. I'm not deliberately ignoring them. I'm just saying that I want to start with this, okay? So I'm going to not look at the queries anymore. Let's get started. Okay, now, when I say reducing a passage to its bones, right? Sometimes we want to see the entire picture. Now in CAT, looking at the entire picture along with its details is not really a good strategy. So we want to leave out some details. That is actually a far more efficient reading strategy. We want to leave out some details. We want to see something like this. And sometimes if the passage is very, very simple, then we might also want to see it like this. Now, how much detail you want to capture is entirely up to you. I prefer to see my passages like this, just the broad outlines, not too much color, not too much detail. So, reading fast is not really about skimming. You're reading the whole thing. You just know where you need to slow down and where you need to speed up. That's really what it's all about. So, passages are made of flesh and bones. What I mean by that is there are some basic points that the author starts out with, and then the writer fleshes out those points, adds details, adds reasons, adds data. You have to figure out what those basic points are that the author started out with. Okay, those are the bones of the passage. So, just take a look at this paragraph. Okay, read it, it doesn't take time. And that's it. That's all the time that you should take to read it. Maybe about 20 to 30 seconds, because you don't actually have to read everything. Here, what you are supposed to be reading is the first sentence. Now, we're talking about infants crying, right? Now, look at the first sentence. To many parents, the infant's crying may be an irritation, especially if it continues for long periods. Now, when it says too many, I automatically start thinking, okay, when I say something is generally true or many people believe it, a lot of times that is not what the author is going to say. How do I know this? Because we have experienced so many passages in which this happens. So I'm going to look at all the words that indicate contrast. This is something that I repeat forever in my classes. When it says but or however or hence or thus or therefore, please pay attention to that sentence. So look at the second sentence. Crying serves important functions. Now the next sentence I will notice because it says perhaps more important. So when the text says more importantly, even more important, I know that the author is highlighting this. So, how do I know what are the bones of the passage? I will look for contrast words. I will look for any highlights that the author is deliberately drawing out for me, something that is presented as important information. Now, if none of this stuff happens, there are no words to indicate what is important and what is not important, then I have a fallback option. I will pay attention to the beginning of the paragraph and I will pay attention to the end of the paragraph. This is particularly helpful when I zone out because that happens to everyone, right? So if you're zoning out, look at the beginning and look at the end of the paragraph. They are good reminders of why that paragraph has been written. Now, this is just an idea. In every passage, I believe that about 50 to 60% of the content is just flesh. You need to remove all of this and look at the underlying skeleton. So, keep in mind that every passage has a purpose, that it started with an outline and then details were added to it. Every paragraph has a specific function, but obviously all the sentences are not important. So I don't have to pay enough attention to each of them. There are main points, there are supporting points, and then there is also background information where the author is just making conversation or maybe just trying to help you understand something a little bit better. So main points, supporting points. How do you know what is the main point? It's like a conclusion. Supporting points are premises. If you have done critical reasoning, then you know what conclusion and premises are. Okay. Now, what is background information? As I said, it's conversation. It is something that the author often uses in the first paragraph in order to draw you in. The author does not actually want to talk about that. Or when the author says that something is generally true, or many people believe, or typically something happens, that is background information. Or if the author is merely stating facts about what is happening in the world, facts, plain old facts, that is background information. So far, there is no argument. Supporting points are evidence, example, reasons, explanations, data, research studies a lot of times could be supporting points as well. So Notice that they are supporting points and ask yourself, okay, what is the conclusion? Now, in every paragraph, there is a point that the author is making, which is why we ask you to follow the 5 pause approach. Consider one para, ask yourself, okay, which sentence is important here? After a while, it has to become a habit. You should be able to say, okay, these sentences I can read through quickly. I don't think that's very important. This sentence probably is slightly more important than the rest. This dialogue is not going to keep happening, it is going to become automated. So, the key skill that we're trying to develop is distinguish between main ideas and supporting points. Okay, so as I said, we're going to take up a passage, not this one. Let me just show you the passage that I did want to take up. Okay. Now, this is a passage from CAT 2023. I want you to look at the 2 paragraphs and I want you to figure out which of these lines are kind of important for yourself. You can't really tell me. All right. Now, I am going to push you guys to read this fast. How do you read fast? As I said, it is knowing when to speed up and when to slow down. If nothing, if there are no transition words, there is nothing that says but, however, so, thus, therefore, read the beginning of the paragraph, read the end of the paragraph. So, look at the beginning. Someone was right when he said language of Europe is translation. Now, the first line does not make any sense to me. Not really. But I say, okay, it's talking about translation. So let me read the next sentence. Maybe that will make sense. Netflix and other deep pocketed global firms know this as well, right? So ultimately, from the first paragraph, I know we are talking about Netflix, we are talking about translation. Now let's go to the second paragraph. The economics of European productions are more appealing too. So now we are saying that Netflix and other global firms are translating European productions and somehow it is financially viable as well. So this is what you really need to notice. This is less than half the content. All right. Now, this basically means that the moment it goes into data or details, that stuff I'm going to read faster. I just need to keep track of what I have said in the first and second paragraph. Netflix, other global firms are using a lot of translation. Why? Because the economics of it are appealing. American audiences are also trying out dubbed or subtitled viewing. That's it. So we're not speed reading. We are reading the whole thing. But we are also noticing that this part is data, and basically, this is what the author is trying to say. Now, this is the experience that you need to figure out. This is the experience that you need to get when you're reading passages. It cannot be passive reading, right? It also has to be okay. This is what I think is important here. This is what I think is important here. So, that needs to consistently be happening at the back of your mind. Don't go to the next paragraph until you have figured it out for this one. Now, let's look at the next one. So you figure out what the main point here is, and I will tell you what I think is the main point. All right, now here, the first line is pretty important. Not everything works across borders. What we have to understand here is that we are trying to explain after that not all content is equally popular in all countries. So from here to here, right? From here to here, I am just explaining this point. This was the main point. Now, apart from that, I should also be able to see that there is a sentence here that says a bigger problem is. So I'm going to notice this as well. After that, the rest of the sentences are just explaining why this is the problem. National broadcasters still dominate. Basically, Netflix and Disney, all of this does not have as much market share as it would like. Why not? The reasons are given after that. So reasons are supporting points. This is what I would notice in these paragraphs. That's it. So you're reading the whole thing, but what you're taking away from it is just this much, which is why it is possible to reduce the text in your mind. So in this paragraph, we're just saying, oh, everything doesn't work everywhere. And streaming devices or streaming services are not very popular. Got this paragraph. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, you'll have to excuse me for just a few seconds while I plug in my laptop, which I forgot to plug in to charge. While you read, all right. Now, I think you would agree that this paragraph is slightly more difficult to understand as compared to the previous ones because there is some language here that I might be uncomfortable with. For example, the very first line, Netflix as a cultural hegemon is seen as a threat. So let's say I don't understand this word, but I can say that I understand the rest of it, right? Cultural threat. Cultural sovereignty is the watchword of European executives worried that Americans will eat their lunch. So basically, the sense that you need to get here is that it seems to be an attack on their culture. Now, even if I don't understand the rest from here to here, remember I told you what you really need to pay attention to is approval, disapproval, advice, recommendation. So look at this last line. This makes European politicians nervous. This talks about disapproval. Why are they disapproving? Because big decisions rest with American executives. That is why Netflix is seen as a threat to their culture. This makes European politicians nervous because it might attack their culture and bring about changes, which obviously they're not very happy about. So I'm going to look at the first sentence. I'm going to look at the last two sentences. And of course, all sentences starting with but, however, nonetheless, nevertheless, I will always look at. So here, this is what I would probably notice. Now, Netflix is seen as a threat to culture. This makes European politicians nervous. Take a look at this paragraph. This is the last one, by the way. So after this, we're going to talk about what we have learned from this. All right. Again, looks like a lot to read, but this paragraph should be an eye opener for you. This should tell you, okay, this is the author's viewpoint. So far, we've been talking about Netflix, how it has started translating European content. Now, based on this paragraph, this is what I would notice. They should not be. This makes European politicians nervous. They should not be. Why should they not be nervous? Because American companies facilitate European integration. American companies actually bring European countries together. The reason that I am going to notice this is that this is clearly an opinion. Now, here also, I will notice this sentence because it says, then they need to have something in common. In order for European countries to coexist and work together, they need to have something in common. Who is providing this common content? Companies like Netflix and others. It's not specifically Netflix, right? So the last paragraph, therefore, is going to be the author's argument. And this is what we need to notice. Now, this is something we do in class as well. All that I'm trying to tell you is that we need to pay very specific attention to only about 40% of the passage. The rest of that is supporting information, which, even if you don't understand, is not going to get in the way of answering your main idea type questions. Okay, now to answer one last question here that I saw. Nonetheless, nevertheless, fundamentally are not different from but. I mean, I could use them slightly differently, but I don't think that the difference is very important. When I say nevertheless or nonetheless, usually it means I'm acknowledging the previous point and I'm saying, yes, though that is true, but I still want to highlight something else. But it is very similar to but. Now, when I tell you that the last paragraph is the most important, this should answer a question as to why, in certain cases, we focus only on certain paragraphs, because this is an argumentative passage. So, wherever we have an argument given in the passage, that's going to be important. Now, I'm going to show you the questions. In this passage, there are two questions that revolve around the author's argument. Okay. Take a look at the first one. For this, I need only the last paragraph. The author sees the rise of Netflix in Europe as step one. Look at the highlighted parts in the paragraph. This is the author's argument. What would you say is the answer to this question? Come on, this is very, very simple. Look at the first two sentences. Okay. Now, how do I know this is the answer? I just need you to look at the text. They should not be. An irony of European integration is that it is often American companies that facilitate it. If Europeans are to do all of this stuff, they need something in common. So clearly, the answer is option 2. Economic threat has not been discussed. Looming cultural threat is something the politicians see it as, but the author argues against it. Filling an entertainment gap, this is the common sense answer. So if you don't understand the argument, you might pick 4. But this is a very, very easy question. The reason that I'm saying it's easy is that you can answer it even if you do not read the rest of the passage. Actual question. It is a unifying force because I'm making an argument about European integration here. I'm talking about European countries having something in common here. Now, there is one related question. This, however, is a little more difficult. Same paragraph. Okay, now remember I was telling you, before you answer reasoning questions, let's sum up the argument. So can we state the argument for our own benefit? What is the argument? This is the argument. Most of us are going to get it wrong because we do not summarize it. So the whole argument is about European integration, right? How is Europe supposed to be integrated? By looking at or binging on the same series. Keeping this in mind. Yes. So now I need to come up with a shadow answer, right? Shadow answer for a weaken the author's conclusion question, which is going to oppose this. Netflix, etc., are not helping European integration. All I've done is that I have opposed this argument that Netflix is not bringing countries together. So now, anything that does not really talk about common content, that is probably not going to be the answer. But at the same time, you need to talk about European integration. So, do you want to revise your answer? Common content, European integration. There's only one option that refers to both these ideas. European integration. Come on, people. Okay, look at option one. If there is variance in the popularity and viewing of Netflix shows in different EU countries, first of all, it talks about European Union countries. That is the first positive sign, right? Now, apart from that, when I say there is variance in the popularity and viewing, are they looking at common content? No, they're not. The second one talks about North America. We are not talking about what North America has in common with Europe. So this is irrelevant to me. The third one, older women across EU enjoy watching romantic comedies on Netflix, whereas younger women prefer historical fiction dramas. Now I keep the, sorry, just give me a sec. I think my camera has dropped. Good. Right. So I was saying the third one also I would keep. Now look at the fourth one. It doesn't talk about the European Union. Netflix has been losing market share to other streaming television service providers. So what? So a lot of you picked two. Why did you pick two? Because you saw the word Europe, you saw the word America, and you said, oh, it talks about Europe and America, must be the answer. That's a very simplistic approach. It's a reasoning question. Step one, summarize the argument. Step two, it's a weaken the argument question. Come up with a shadow answer. The shadow answer for a weaken the argument is anything that goes in the opposite direction. So now if you're wondering, why do I go wrong with questions like this? Are you doing these steps? So ultimately, the answer is option one. Now, what I was really trying to show you here is that you need to understand only part of the passage really well in order to answer at least two questions out of four. All right. So in this case, if I had just understood the author's argument in the last paragraph, I should have been able to get two questions right. Now, if you look at the same passage, this is CAT 2023, so you can look at the remaining questions as well. you'll realize that the remaining two questions are specific detailed questions for which you will need to go back to the passage and look at what those details are. Those questions, if you decide to rely entirely on memory and understanding, you may not get right. All right. So let's also change our approach to answering questions in case we're not doing that. According to Ford, the Netflix isn't the one uniting. Does that not weaken? It doesn't talk about the European Union, right? Look at option 4. Netflix has been losing market share, but it doesn't talk about where, which country. That's why we let go of 4 entirely. Okay. And the third one, it does talk about a slight variation in their preferences, but nowhere does it say that there is no common content. It only talks about one specific subset. So if I compare 1 and 3, 1 clearly tells me that people are not watching the same content, whereas the third tells me a subset of the people are not watching the same content. That's it. The fourth one doesn't talk about the European market. All right. So what is it that we need to do? We simply need to look at the important sentences. For this, you do need to go back, rethink, take a look at the important points one more time, and then start looking at options. Otherwise, these questions are going to go wrong. Now, that's all that I wanted to show you, honestly, that in every passage, this may or may not be possible, but this is definitely possible for at least 3 passages out of 4. You need to understand only 30 to 40% of the content to answer the main idea type questions. All right. Also, please remember that argumentative passages, you typically get at least 1 or 2 of those. In an argumentative passage, just ensure that you are looking at the author's argument, which sometimes may be confined to a single paragraph only. All right. Now, any remaining questions that you have, you can ask now. And after this, my recommendation is please take a look at this 2023 passage. I think this was slot 1 or slot 2. But anyway, you can search for it, look at the remaining 2 questions and solve them. All right, now I'm going to go back to looking at my phone for your questions. SimCAT take home and proctored mocks, is a percentile comparable? The percentile is always going to be comparable, right? Percentile is always relative. The only difference might be that take-home SimCATs, the percentiles are based on historical data. So the set of people who are taking those would basically be your seniors of last year. But that's it. Percentiles are always comparable. How can we identify the correct option when there are 2 very similar options? Would it be best just to leave the question in cases like that? Yeah, it is actually better. So if you're stuck between 2 options, you have given it 2 minutes and you still can't figure out the answer, you should leave the question. In SimCATs with fewer passages, I get 90% accuracy. When I push attempts, accuracy drops. Okay. So in that case, maybe you need to push yourself to do, let's say, 3 passages or 4 passages every day. See, ultimately it has to become a habit so that it doesn't feel like that you're rushing in the test. So the normal time that you take to solve any passage should be 8 to 9 minutes. Also, you need to be okay with dropping accuracy for more attempts. 90% accuracy is honestly too high for VRC. You need to be okay with 65. If you're unable to answer questions, even if you comprehend the RC, either the questions are this variety, the reasoning, or specific detail variety for which you need to go back to the passage. Okay, so if you are not taking these steps, going back to the passage or framing shadow answers, then you may not be able to arrive at the correct answer. How long will this session be? Well, the session is officially scheduled till 7:30, but normally we don't continue for 2 hours. The take-home percentiles are reliable, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that is why you are a little suspicious, because it shows that your results are good. Okay, percentiles are always reliable. So I wouldn't particularly worry about the score so much. So if the take-home SIMCATs are showing that you're getting, say, 50 in VARC, maybe that is not a good indicator. Percentiles are reliable. Will I be opening my plan slots anytime soon? Let me let me try and do that right after this session, because I've been avoiding taking on more work. But yeah, right after this session, maybe give me 10 minutes. Um, I try solving 3 RCs, but accuracy drops. So for everyone, I think the best answer to how to increase attempts is make it an everyday habit. The moment you say, I will do this task every day, it is no longer a task. It is something you're used to. How many mocks to target till CAT? Already done 12. Okay. I think maybe about 20 mocks, I think is generally decent. But I'm not saying you shouldn't do more. I'm just saying 20 is like the very minimum that I should take. Anything else? And if the lights are flashing in the background, it's not because there's some, horror show happening. It's just that the power is fluctuating. Anything else? Okay, so the rest of you're just going to hang on and wait for me to share more information. Is there anything else that you want to ask, which I may not have answered or may have answered badly? Okay. Uh, the percentile variation, I think, is a little too much. I mean, if you said that it's between 80 to 90, I think that's fine. Because the difference is very small. 60 to 95, a little higher. So just check the overall cutoffs for the test. Are you doing better in difficult tests and not so well in easy tests? It could go the other way around. So, for example, I don't do very well if the test is very simple, because I tend to be cautious in marking answers, right? So if the test gets very, very easy, then I tend to still be cautious and then I lose out on opportunities. Or is it the other way around? When the test gets difficult, your percentile drops. If you're not able to see any of these trends, then don't worry. Keep working hard and making sure that you are trying to clear the cutoffs for every section. I think that's the best goal to have. You do better in difficult tests, then you're being too cautious. You're being too cautious. That's basically it, right? So in an easy test, your percentile is dropping because you should be answering more questions and you're not. So I think anyone who has an accuracy of less than 50%, 2 passages. If your accuracy is already in the 60 zone, then please try to push your attempts. If you are at 2 passages, start doing 3 every day so that you're able to score more. In fact, in some of the SIMCATs, I will not tell you which ones, you are supposed to do all 4 passages. The tests were easy enough for you to do that. And in VARC, you cannot double guess. Don't go back and rethink your answers. You need to say, okay, I'm going to work on it. Either I'm going to mark it or I'm not going to mark it. After that, you're supposed to forget about that question. And as I said, do it every day. So if you've decided to do 3 passages, do 3 passages every day. If you've decided to do 4 passages, do 4 passages every day and time yourself. You have to convince yourself that it'll be fine, right? It's, an all is well or all will be well scenario. So you have to tell yourself that. How will you be able to tell yourself that? If you are able to solve this many passages daily, and if you're able to get about 60 to 70% right, you'll say, okay, I do this every day. I can do this in the SIMCAT. For non-IM colleges, I'm assuming it's FMS and MDI. Yes, you do need to separately apply apart from the CAT form. When and how do we need to apply? So you just need to, you can obviously visit their websites and see if the applications are open. But if you have joined a coaching institute, so whether you're an IMS student or a non-IMS student, you will also receive notifications. So you can wait for the notifications, but I would typically check from the month of September onwards. If I take more time than usual, we have to take, how can I solve it in more than 15 minutes? Maybe I'm thinking you want to say less than 15 minutes. Yeah. So the first thing that you need to work on is ensuring that your reading time does not exceed a fixed amount. So if your reading time itself is 7 to 8 minutes, then it will undoubtedly take 15 minutes. Another thing you can check is how much time are you spending per question? It will show you how much time per question, right? That should not be more than 2 minutes. So if I'm answering 4 questions, I'm taking 2 minutes, that is going to be 8 minutes plus about 7 minutes to read, then it will be 15. So I need to ensure that my reading time is less. My reading time from 7 minutes needs to come down to about 5 minutes. From 5 minutes, I need to try and see if I can bring it down to 4 gradually. And the way to do that is to speed up at certain points and slow down at certain points, because not everything is as important. Will video editor profile work for WorkX points? So you have to meet the requirements. You have to be employed full time after graduation with supporting documents. Okay, so as long as you're meeting those requirements, you should get the WorkX points. Thank you, Raj. But you know what? Whenever I do the video solutions on the portal, a lot of times after I do the solutions, while I'm recording them, there's a certain mindset that I'm recording them with, right? At that time, I understand. And once I have spoken, I sometimes lose track and I think, did I make any sense whatsoever? So I'm glad that you're saying that, because it gets rid of some of my anxiety, because I always worry if I made anything. Anything else, guys? Okay. So now this is specifically for people who are struggling with comprehension, low attempts, low accuracy, unable to understand. Okay. You need to ensure that you're reading some articles every day. Basic reading. Yeah. Now, basic reading needs to start with half an hour. It needs to maybe go to about 45 minutes. Okay, 45 minutes. And I would also suggest that you start doing some sort of a summary. So I know that for some people, I have said, don't write. Okay, some people I've said, don't write. But for you, you do need to write. Okay, also, guys, not fishing for compliments. I'm just saying that. Okay. So start writing and then use one of the AI engines to check whether whatever you have understood is kind of similar to what what say ChatGPT is explaining. That does not mean ask ChatGPT to explain everything. You first put in your effort and then ask it to explain. In fact, I have tried doing it in two ways. I have said, explain this passage to me in one sentence. Provide a detailed explanation of this passage in very simple words. Okay, so please use technology to your advantage. Keep writing, keep comparing, keep writing, keep comparing. The reason I'm saying that you should do that with articles is that passages you may not always be able to copy paste, but passages you'll be able to. Sorry, not passages, but articles you'll be able to. If you end up getting 2 questions wrong after comprehending, as I said, check. Are they reasoning questions? Are they logical structure questions? Are they specific detail questions? Now, there's another thing that happens a lot of times. See, there are some questions where we are pretty sure that we have the right answer. But then when we look at the solution, we say, oh, how did I miss that? And then you end up feeling silly. That is one variety, okay, where you have an insight and you realize, okay, I should have seen this. There are other questions where you've answered, but even when you look at the solution, you say, you know what, I don't really think that I still get it. I can't see the difference between these two options. Sometimes it may not be your fault. Sometimes the question might be deliberately out to get you. Okay, so when that happens to me, I say, okay, that's not my fault. That's the question. So you need to do the same thing. Otherwise, Ankita, specifically to answer what you're saying, one of the things that you could try to do is ensure that you're guessing less. So are you actually eliminating options? Yeah. Are you actually eliminating options, or are you saying, you know what, I've already spent 2 minutes, let me mark something? So that tendency has to be reduced. Oh, okay, okay. So when you're using ChatGPT, right, don't give it your summary. ChatGPT will always support you because they're designed to be that way, right? So don't do that. You write your own summary and you will have to compare it with ChatGPT. So just ask them to explain it to you in simple words, and then you see what is the difference. All right. Uh, Shadow answer. Shadow answer is the solution to the getting stuck between two options scenario. You need to create shadow answers. Again, it doesn't eliminate that problem entirely, but it does help to a great extent. Huh. So then you're guessing, right? If you're stuck between two options, and after that, you are simply saying, you know what, I'm going to pick an answer, then you are guessing. Then you need to expect that one of those questions goes wrong. Which is why if you're trying to aim for two-thirds accuracy, then why do all four? Leave out one question. How does it matter? You're anyway going to get it wrong, right? So always think in terms of accuracy. What's the breakdown of 8 questions in the VA? Okay. So the VA section changes a little bit every year. Last year, we did not see any parajumbles. We saw summary questions, odd sentences, and paragraph completion. One year, we did not see any odd sentences, all right, but we saw the other three variety. So the breakup is not fixed. You will have to simply look at that section. What we have seen is that generally it kind of varies between these four question types. Parajumbles, odd sentences, paracompletion, summary, usually 2 to 3 of each. Should we solve the VA before RC because they are theta? You have to take that call and see what works better for you. I tried solving VA before RC. That did not work too well for me because I ended up wasting a lot of time. So one year I decided to do 3 RCs, then VA, and then the last RC, which worked far, far better. So use your sectional test to figure out what is the method that works for you. Another thing that happens for people is that it takes a while for our brains to warm up. If that is the case, then start with VA. So those theta questions will give you that time to warm up before you switch to RC, where there's less scope for error. Okay, if that is the case. I'm struggling with shadow answers. If you're struggling with a shadow answer, a lot of times it's just out of fear because we keep worrying that we'll be wrong. It's okay if you're wrong. You just need to try and create an answer or predict it in your own head. Even if you're wrong 50% of the time, that's fine. But just keep doing it. What about the tempting option that I always fall for? Okay, see, sometimes you can use intuition if your intuition works for you. But if you have taken, say, about 10, 12 tests, including some past year papers, so do take some of the past year papers, and you need to keep track of all the questions where you simply chose an option and look at the percentage accuracy for those questions. If you get it right 50% of the time, go ahead, guess. If you get it right less than 50% of the time, then every time you're faced with that situation, you need to say, I'm not doing it. So use the data to your advantage. But for that, you just need to be very, very honest and say, okay, this question I guessed, and that is why I got it wrong. For identifying which RCs to solve, I tried assigning the value of the passage. Okay. How to select passages? So today I've been telling people that, look, guys, you need to do 3 or you need to do 4 passages, right? So there, all you need to decide is which passage not to do. The passage that I don't do is probably the one that I don't even feel like reading. So the topic sometimes plays a huge role. But I think a better way to select passages is to simply look at the language. So you need to spend maybe 15 to 20 seconds trying to see how fast you can read the first paragraph. Sometimes you will go wrong with that method, I agree. But if you're able to read the first paragraph in 25 to 30 seconds, then you should attempt that passage. How can we identify which question is reasoning? Okay, that's fairly simple. If it says supports the argument, weakens the argument, assumption, definitely a reasoning question. So again, identify critical reasoning question types. They have fixed question stems: supporting the argument, weakening the argument, assumptions for the argument, reasoning. All right. Another question is the one that asks you, why has the author said something, or the author has said something in order to. This is a logical structure question. So you need to simply figure out the question stems that you're getting wrong. If you look at the video solution, normally, we say that, okay, this is a critical reasoning question, or this is a logical structure question. You should always do the TETA questions, at least in VRC. I'm not saying for the other sections. For VRC, you should do the TETA because you need to do them in 1.5 minutes. After 1.5 minutes, mark some answer. Don't give it time. Maybe it wants you to give time, but you're not supposed to give it. That is where you have to resist the lure of the test. Okay. I would always say attempt TETA. If you're saying, should I do MCQs or TETA questions? Regardless, always do TETA. So it is always TETA plus MCQ. It's not TETA or MCQ. Always do the TETA questions. Okay, I hope the 4th RC works out. 2 RCs, 4 to 5 VA, accuracy. You should try for the 3rd RC. Yeah, absolutely. If your accuracy is above 60, you should definitely try to increase attempts. Does the actual CAT have one easy RC? Yes, it does. Undoubtedly one easy RC. But the problem that we have seen after that one easy RC is that everything else seems almost equally difficult. So one easy, two moderate, one slightly difficult is the pattern we've seen. If you can't understand the passage, I think this I've already answered. Remember reading, trying to write down the main points, and then using ChatGPT or some other method to check whether your understanding is correct. So you need to do that every day. Is the sectional cutoff increased by how many questions do we have to get correct? Okay. So the sectional cutoff actually varies across IIMs. So for our test, we normally keep a sectional cutoff of 85 percentile because we really haven't seen it go too far high above that. So if you're consistently meeting the 85th percentile in a section, then you're safe. How many questions do you have to get correct? Off the cuff, slightly difficult for me to say because it's been different in different years. But I would say that for VARC, you probably need to get somewhere in the 20s. So maybe about 22 to 24 marks in order to clear the cutoff. Should we decide the strategy beforehand? Yeah, absolutely. You need to know the approach beforehand. So, when you start, when you go into a war, I'm sorry I'm using this strategy, but, it just came to me. So when you go into a war, you have some idea of what you're going to do, right? But at the same time, there might be a few last minute changes which you could not predict. What are these last minute changes? The number of questions might be different. VA questions might be interspersed between RC questions. Instead of 4 passages, you might have 5 passages. Instead of 4 passages, you might have 3 passages and more VA questions. So they might change the distribution of the questions. But other than that, what else are they going to change, really? So you need to be pretty sure that I'm definitely doing 3 passages and I'm definitely doing 5 to 6 VA questions. Now, should I do 4 passages or should I do 8 questions? That is something you'll have to decide on the day of the exam. Does reading daily for a while help? Yes. In fact, the only reason that I am good at VARC is that I have been reading. Otherwise, I did not study grammar well. I did not mug up dictionary words. I didn't do any of those things. Okay, so it's actually a combination. The reading RCs, sorry, the reading articles is more for your reading speed. You just need to read. The other thing is that you need to be able to read the kind of stuff that troubles you. So around this time, you guys also need to be able to say, I have difficulty with scientific passages. So let me read a lot of science articles. I have difficulty with psychology passages. So let me read a lot of psychology type articles. So your reading content can also be tweaked in order to increase your comfort with certain content. Okay. So the live solving, I know that a lot of people have asked for it, but that session has to be created in the sense that someone has to say, okay, please do a live solving session from amongst my bosses. Do you have any source you would recommend for philosophy? Yeah, I do actually. So one of the sources is Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So you can take a look at that. Fairly dense, very, very boring passages. Okay. Another really good website that I think is helpful is Al Daily. Al Daily, and of course, Purely Philosophy, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The time limit per RC with question solving. Okay. Um, so in that case, you need to definitely finish again the first 2 RCs in about 18 to 19 minutes. The third RC, you also need to kind of finish in another 7 to 8 minutes. After that, you have about 12 to 13 minutes for VA. 2023 slot 3. Okay, so what happened last year also was that slot 3 apparently was slightly more difficult. Yeah, so maybe don't look at slot 3. What is generally considered a decent to good accuracy? Generally, about 70% is considered good accuracy in VRC. Okay. Oh, okay. If you have trouble with abstract concepts, yeah, definitely read Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and Al Daly because there is a lot of literary criticism there. Very helpful. If you have difficulty with economic RCs, you might want to read a pink newspaper. Economic Times, Business Standard, Mint, any of those. Okay. Percentile cutoffs, I don't really want to get into because that's not exactly what we have. I mean, I know it does say ask me anything, but it had a theme. Um, but I would say that you definitely need to aim for about a 90 plus percentile. PGP ABM, definitely 90 plus, just to be on the safe side. Is there a difficult level in any particular slot? It changes from year to year. See, the first slot is always a bit of a surprise, right? So I actually prefer the first slot because then no one colors my views. I can, solve it whatever way I want. But then, if you're in the second slot or the third slot, then people say, oh, this happened and this happened. And there are always a few differences in every slot. So you should not let the overall difficulty level decide your approach. Your approach has to be whatever you have decided it to be based on the SIMCATs. Okay. The rest of it, they are going to take care of. Yeah, you can't select slots. You can't really select slots, nor can you select, I mean, you can specify locational preference, but they will assign one to you. So, I mean, I've gotten slots in Nasik, I've gotten slots in different places in Bombay. It really doesn't make a difference as to when you fill up the CAT form. It's pretty random. Okay, so if the slot is difficult, just have enough faith that they're going to scale it up for you. It is going to pay off in another way. The only problem is that some people panic if they get a tough slot. Okay, so panic should not set in. You need to keep in mind that if it is difficult for you, it will be difficult for everyone else. If you're able to keep that in mind and don't let go of logic, you should be okay. Uh, yeah, so those marks in the SIMCAT definitely need to come up. Otherwise, you're missing the sectional cutoffs, or you might miss some sectional cutoffs. I'm able to do all the RCs, but score around 26 to 30. Okay, are you doing VA? Because at least about 9 marks need to come from VA. So if that's not really working out for you, then yes, it is going to be tough. So when I was saying do all the RCs, it's not exclusively RCs. It is RC plus VA. Huh. So then that needs to work out. So you have to understand that the test is designed in a particular manner. When will we solve RC? We solved an RC. See, it's an AMA session, right? So the idea is not to really solve a lot of content. The idea is to look at some content, but mostly it's a question and answer session. Otherwise, how will you ask me anything? And I'm pretty sure you've solved enough RCs in class. Or there is so much content on YouTube that you can look at in which we solve RCs. It should be tough to comprehend. Al Daily is pretty good. So Al Daily is actually going to take you to different websites. Um, Trade-off between taking more time to do limited questions. In VARC, I think spending more time does not necessarily pay off. I think that 2 minutes is sufficient time because the test is designed to be solved in a particular way. See, when they give you 40 minutes and they're asking you to solve 24 questions, why are they doing that? They're doing that to tell you that, look, you have about 1.8 minutes per question. Let's work with that time. Um, Writing accuracy is not going beyond 50 to 60%. Okay. So, Sahil, combination of two things only, reading and solving. So you need to ensure that you're solving about 2 to 3 passages practically every day. And even after that, if it does not go beyond 50 to 60%, just keep in mind that at 50% accuracy, even with negative marking, you will still get 1 mark for every question that you attempt, right? More or less. So if you're solving all 24, then you should get at least 24 marks. So if nothing else, that will happen. So you can still try and stick to a certain number of attempts. The problem happens if it is less than 50 or if it goes to 20 or 30, because then it's not worth it. But for now, 2 to 3 passages. Do two persons have the same absolute marks but different? Yeah, it's possible. If they're in two different slots, absolutely, that can happen. Different marks but different percentiles. Thank you, Nirmal. Any tips for summary questions? I've been feeling that summary questions lately have been a little difficult, also because I don't get them right. So I am slightly biased. In CAT, however, I don't think summary questions are as challenging. So my approach is, if I understand the paragraph, then I'm going to give it a shot. At the same time, just make sure that you are not solving all three because you believe you need to solve all three. Because summary questions are actually the most time consuming question type. So if you're taking 2.5 minutes to solve it, that is actually the time that you could use to solve another passage. So sometimes you need to make a choice between solving the fourth passage versus solving all the summary question. I think a good idea is to solve maybe two of them. It is Arts and Letters Daily, Al Daily, that one. The test is designed to get you to solve more RC questions. That's why there's 16 RC questions and 8 VA questions, right? So you just need to follow that indication. Definitely more RCs. I don't think the board has much to do with whether you're good at VRC or not. I think it has to do more with which medium we grew up with and how much we have read and consumed content in English to some extent. I think reading plays a pretty big role. So in case you feel that that has been a lapse, you need to try and make up for that lapse as far as possible. So I know people who are determined to read, say, 10 books by the time that CAT happens. I know it's a stretch, not everyone will be able to do it. But the point is, the more you read, the more passages you solve, the more experience you get. That result or that effort may not pay off immediately, but it will pay off in a month's time. Accuracy was good while practicing. So is it the time constraint? Are you trying to solve a lot of questions and therefore things are going wrong? In which case you might want to slow down and say, I'm only going to do 12 questions. And then take a lot of time and see if your accuracy comes back on track. Samad, no, I don't think that's likely to happen because it correlates with your score, not accuracy. Okay. If you feel lost in between the passage, okay, in that case, what you need to ensure is, that you're doing what I was asking you to do. You need to do less. So I know I said do 3 to 4 RCs every day, but for you, Sahil specifically, it says Sahil Sales and Services, so I'm just going to call you Sahil. For you specifically, if things are not working out, if accuracy is not improving, a lot of times it helps to do less. That basically means read very peacefully. Write down some stuff that you understand. If you're not fond of writing, there's another method that you could use. Read and then try to say whatever you have read. That actually also improves your speaking skills. So you read an article. After that, pretend that you're trying to explain it to someone else as to what you have read. And again, try to do it every day. You don't even need to check whether you have understood it correct. Just check if you're able to explain it. Because if you're able to explain it, it means you've understood something. And if you're getting trapped in too close options, same story. You need to ensure that you're framing shadow answers for all the questions for which it is possible. Okay. So now I will have to end this session because I'm being reminded that there's another session that is supposed to happen. All right. So I'm really, really sorry. I'll have to go. I know there are more questions. Okay. We will try and schedule this again. Bye-bye. I'm sorry. It's just that I will have to let the next meeting start. That's the only thing. Okay. I'm not a math person in any case. I'm really, really sorry.